Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, near or far, high or low. Welcome back to the Coach D podcast, where we dive deep into some of the best minds in the game. Today's guest is top tier basketball skills trainer who's made a name for himself across the US by helping players unlock their full potential with the ball in their hands. He's known for his expertise in footwork, timing, separation moves, and finishing through contact, as well as overall ball control. Whether you're a player, coach, a parent, this episode is going to be jam packed with insight. So, listeners, without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Coach Hunter Rhodes. Appreciate you, Coach.
I appreciate you having me. I can't wait, and I'm ready to get rolling.
I love it. And just before we even get started, Coach, talk to me. I mean, literally, we just kind of spoke about just you not having a break within 3 weeks, and just the life of a coach is hectic, fun, exhausting, rewarding. Like all it could be all in the same day. So, having said that, Coach Hunter, how is your physical and how is your mental?
Oh, for sure. That's a great point that you brought that up. Trying to find a balance is something that I'm even trying to do a lot better job of. I have 3 kids at home and, a wife and just a family in general. So just trying to find a balance, but I'm also on the point of taking that next step of I want to do as much as I can because I want to continue to keep growing the brand, the name, just keep reaching new people, a lot of different opportunities that are coming that I feel like I haven't been able to turn down necessarily.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, you got to take care of yourself first. So, having that mental, break, that, even physical break as well, because you see a lot of my videos and the way I move and stuff like that. I'm recording content all the time. I'm demonstrating, I do the things as well as teach them. So, I'm just trying to find a good balance is something that I'm working for right now. And the wife and I talk about it a lot. Just, it's hard to, but at the same time, you got to take care of yourself. So then you're better for your athletes and everybody else that you're working with.
Right. Right, and kind of just, I guess, starting with the introduction and the background, can you tell us a bit about your journey into basketball and how you became a skills trainer focused on ball handling and player movement?
Yeah. So, a lot of people, as you can see my shirt right here, it
Yeah,
says move
different.
different.
Yes, sir.
That's just a slogan that came about. And I'll explain that here more in a little bit. But, you know, I, I'm in my hometown now, a small town. I grew up here. I coached high school basketball here for 5 years. I was an assistant for one. And then,
Okay.
basically a year ago, I resigned from that and started my training business. So it's only been about a year and a half. And
A
it's,
big leap.
I'm very,
Wow.
yeah, very, very fortunate, but I guess I can backtrack a little bit. I played high school basketball. I went on to play junior college basketball for 2 years, where I was an All-American and national champion.
Wow.
And then I went to play Division 1 basketball for 2 years. Had opportunities to go play pro overseas and stuff like that. But, to be honest, I was ready to be, a normal person for once. So
Mm.
I had a daughter. Um, at the time, so I was a senior in college, had my daughter, my first child of 3, and then, I was just ready to be home, but, I couldn't get away from it.
Right.
So I ended up coaching for 5 years, assistant for 1 year here in my hometown, and then, like I said, started my training business, and then it's just allowing me to get back into it the way I love to approach it. The teaching side of it, just the skill development, I feel like that fits my personality a lot more than, I guess, the whole broad aspect of coaching.
Yeah.
I love being able to work and to see the progress of individuals rather than maybe a whole team setting, which don't get me wrong, I still miss coaching.
Right.
But I love this player development side. That just fits me a lot better in my opinion.
Yeah. And I'm curious, coach, like when was that moment for you? Because you kind of just highlighted, you being an all American, you winning the championship and playing at the D1 level. I feel like there's a moment where whether it's the game starts to slow down or all that training and all those reps really start to pay off where you just cross someone up or you make it through or you just can't miss the game becomes easy for you. For yourself, Coach Hunter, like when was the moment you knew that you was nice at basketball?
I'm a pretty humble guy, but in my opinion, I feel like right now in this state, like I'm 10 times better than I ever was in college and everything. The way, I'm stronger now. the mental side of it, the IQ that you get, the older you get, the more knowledge and understanding of the game in general.
Yeah.
To me, like I've grown so much. And my ball handling's way better now. Like I've never worked on my handles so much. I use a heavy ball in all my videos, and people don't understand that I'm using a heavy ball most of the time. But yes, that's a heavy ball.
I didn't even know.
Saying
It's crazy close. Oh,
yeah.
these are.
Yeah, so most of the time, that black and orange ball that I use is a heavy ball. So and a lot of the players I train are like, "Oh my god, I did not know that was a heavy ball." And then they start laughing. I'm like, "Yeah, you have a little bit respect for this old guy now." Um, but the game, like there's steps to it. I'm not gonna lie, sound here and say the game was easy at all times. It's just not how it is. But I've continued to get out of high school, going to JUCO, right? Really good athletes all the time. So the game was sped up. I had to figure it out. Ended up starting my freshman year at junior college basketball, and halfway through the season, I made my first start. Which it's steps. It's day by day. It's rep by rep, and then my sophomore year was the leap where I'm like, okay, I made a huge jump. It really wasn't necessarily my skill set. I got better, of course, but it's more of the mental side, the confidence that you get, the understanding of what you're doing. Really changed a lot going to my sophomore year, because I was an honorable mention all conference my freshman year. And then I was first team All-American my sophomore year, and we won the national championship. So just being able to slow the game, like you said, slow the game down, just understand what it's about. But then it's the same thing going on to Division 1. I had to learn a new way to play. I didn't have to have the ball in my hands 24/7. I was more, get us in the offense, which I had to understand from high school to JUCO. And then now I didn't need to make as many plays at the Division 1 level, because there's a lot more other guys that can.
Right.
So my junior year, it was, hit or miss, play a lot, didn't play much. And then my senior year, about halfway through that season, towards the end of it, I started to be able to find my groove and play the way I wanted to play, and ended up doing very well the last, 10 or so games of the season. So it's just a learning curve. You just keep learning, keep growing, just keep taking steps in the right direction.
And with that, like, because I'm always intrigued to know when a player or coach, when they get that first moment of early success. I mean, you being a champion at such a young age at that level, what would you say went into you and your team winning that championship? Like when you kind of reflect, like how was the training sessions looking like? How was the overall players like, the coaching system like? What were some of the qualities that your team really developed for you to reach that stage?
Oh, great question. What's interesting about a junior college is that most kids are there for 2 years, sometimes one, depending on if they're transfers or not. So this is where it gets very interesting.
Okay.
Because you can't stay for more than two unless you redshirt or something like that. But so basically, my freshman year, I had our group of guys that were all freshmen. So we had like 5, 6 of us. And then our sophomore year, we had the still 5 or 6, but we had a whole new freshman squad come in. So basically, our team split in half. And the biggest thing there isn't really, I wouldn't say well, obviously practices are very crucial, stuff like that, but it's the chemistry and how well you mesh, just, quote unquote, as like a family, as a team, doing things together outside, because you don't have much time together. You're at practice, you go to class, but it's just basketball. The junior college level, everybody's there for one reason, and that is, to make it to the next level, which makes it very, very difficult. And especially with the landscape of how college basketball is now, it's just crazy. I don't even know, with all the NIL, the levels, JUCO, you getting a free year, not getting a free year. Like I'm hearing tons of different rumors, and I see a whole bunch of different things, but I would just say the overall aspect of being close as a team, hanging out, going playing video games after practice, going out to eat, just doing things together. Other than basketball, I think that's what allowed us to really, build that chemistry and take the next steps, with the basketball, I guess, so in our hands. So.
Yeah, and it's just it's so funny you say that, coach, because with this literally today just came back from a under 16 girls tournament, and it was such a great opportunity because we have like a couple of the girls have gone on to play under 18s, but we still got maybe like half of the team, and then we got a bunch of like new players, a bunch of rookies, and it was so great to see them during timeouts or during like the breaks between game one and game two. They were like huddle up, okay, guys, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. And just seeing them bond off the court does wonders. And to be honest, coach, that's been a reminder that yes, as a coach, I do want to teach team tactics, offense, defense, how to shoot, how to pass, how to read the game, how to stay calm and composed. But at the same time, for me, basketball is so special because yes, I've learned so much and I'm meeting amazing people, but I've got people who I can call my brothers and my sisters because of basketball, you know. So I mean, just like you said, it's one quality that you learned that led you to a championship was just how well you guys mesh, not just on the court, but off the court as well. So that was a good shout, coach, man. Good shout.
Yep. No, definitely. I think that and to me, that's the most important thing because, the best teams, they always seem to get along really well.
Right.
And our coaches, even at the Division I level, but junior college did a great job of, having those team dinners, those team meals. And that's not just for, hey, here's a team meal for food. It's no, let's get everybody together. Let's, build that chemistry. Let's build that togetherness and, let's see it execute now when we really need,
Right.
to happen. So
Exactly. And just I mean, me just coming across your page, it really stood out because one thing I love is when coaches can demonstrate, but again, they teach at a high level. And I've just kind of really realized now, I mean, you've run multiple camps across the US, coach. So what's been the most rewarding part of working with players at different levels and regions?
Um, and that's another good question. It's just there's different. It's cool to see the different styles of basketball.
Yeah.
You know, based on like whether I'm in Illinois right now, Central Illinois. So if I go to a different state, you can just see the difference of how kids approach games. How they just know what's important, what's not important, stuff like that. But like the one thing I tell that, especially working with young kids, 'cause I worked from all the way from kindergartner all the way up until like pro guys.
Love
So
it.
I have a huge range and I have to really understand. And it's hard for me sometimes. Like I can't explain to what I do to a pro guy the same way I explain to a kindergartner, because two different spectrums here. So we can't be talking about the same thing a lot of the times. But, I would say it's really rewarding to see the younger athletes make progress. Just as simple as, okay, we made a left-handed layup for the first time,
Yeah.
and like they're working on it, then we make it. So it's like, oh, they don't, they get down on themselves. And that's one thing about me. What parents say about what I do isn't the skill work. They don't really talk about that much. I just act like that's icing, on the cake.
Yeah.
But the confidence and their kid is smiling when they leave the gym.
Love that.
A kid with the confidence, if kids have confidence, they can achieve anything they want to achieve,
Exactly.
So just see, for the little kids, it's just making them next step, like, do okay, I can cross the ball over now with rhythm. I
Yeah.
can move it. I'm dancing a little bit, just seeing that little things, it's really refreshing,
Yeah.
because compared to an older guy, a lot of them know what they're doing. It's really detailed and breaking things down.
Yeah.
So, just seeing them apply some of those game, like, things we're working on to real game scenarios, stuff like that. But I would say the rewarding part of it is just seeing those younger kids
Yeah.
really have a smile on their face
Here we go.
and want to come back. They just want to keep coming back. And to me, I think that's really rewarding. Don't get me wrong, working with the better of the best of the players, it's great, but they're in there. It's work all the time compared to a younger kid where we have some fun. We always try to keep it fun, but there's a difference between working with them.
Right. And this is a topic that honestly I'm gonna be a student, to be honest, in this podcast. Because for me, I've kind of related back to how I started basketball. For me, I was always one of the more confident shooters on my team. So catch and shoot off the dribble, but my style off the dribble was very minimalistic, just in terms of maybe 2 or 3 dribbles max just to get to my spot. And especially now, I mean, this was back in 2008. So you compare to now, like having a bag in 2008 versus now, like you need to put on like 2 rucksacks with the amount of different ISO moves and separation moves, you know. So when it just comes to your ball handling philosophy, Coach Hunter, like in your opinion, what truly makes a great ball handler in today's game?
So I love that you brought that up. So for me, like, obviously I have a shirt, that says move different. And a lot of people are like, oh, you do move different. Like it has nothing to do with that. We'll get into that, like you just said, the question you just asked. But just moving different to me is like how you approach the game, how hard you work. Are you taking care of your grades? Are you doing things that are going to really take yourself to the next level, not as just a player, but as a person?
Right.
We have to do things differently to reach the goals that we want to reach. So that's kind of the backstory on this. It's not
Right.
just about the way I move on the court; it's
Yeah.
about how we do everything else in life. So, but when you come back to what makes somebody a great ball handler, and what you said about a bag, a lot of these moves I teach aren't for the move itself. And that's where a lot of people, and I explain this to parents, explain it to kids. The reason why we do certain moves, like say we do 3, 4, 5 different moves, it has nothing to do with that move because I don't want kids doing that in the game. I've been a coach. Okay, keeping it simple is more effective, and there's a less chance for you to turn the ball over and whatnot. So I am doing these moves to make sure their balance, their footwork, their rhythm, their timing, their base are all getting better. Because the game to me starts from the ground up. And if you don't have good footwork, you're not going to be a good shooter. You're not going to be a good ball handler. You're not going to be a good defender. Okay. So having that balance, that footwork, the rhythm, the timing, it's a rhythm game. So to me, moving different, the way you move is a lot more important than the move. So, hey, go do it. And, so a lot of the stuff I do is about how we do the move. I'm not going to tell a kid to go do a crossover because I do not like seeing, hey, go do this, go do that, go do that. I'm not that type of trainer. Okay, I'll tell a kid what to do, but if I see there's mistakes, I want to help them. How do we do that move? Okay, because if you're just doing the same thing over and over again with bad mechanics, just bad posture, just
Yeah.
bad habits in general, you're developing more and more bad habits.
Right.
So I care about how the athletes move rather than what move we do, because once you learn how to move, you can do any move.
Mm, I like that. I like that. And even
So
you,
that's kind of my philosophy behind it. So.
right. And you even just mentioned it there, like when you kind of look at a player, you're very much hands-on and teaching them not just what to do, but how to do it. And again, just emphasis on movement, which I think is so key. And in a way, I feel like, and this is what brought me to your page again, Coach Hunter, is you teach not the ball, the movement that gets the ball moving. Because at the end of the day, it's all about misdirection and how you can change speed, change direction, and use your body to fake and kind of misdirect the defense. So when you start working with a new athlete, like what do you evaluate first when it comes to their handle and movement with the ball?
First of all, yeah, I put them through, I let them kind of do it themselves. And that's where I've been trying to transition to because at the end of the day, all athletes move different. Everybody's
Yeah,
different. The way you're built, the way, if you're
yeah,
taller, shorter, where are you strong at? So I let these athletes do it themselves before I kind of step in and kind of correct and see what I think they can do better. Because I don't want to change something if maybe they're good at it. There's certain things I can tell them, but it's always footwork. It's always footwork. And even some of the best athletes that I've worked with, guys that are touching the top of the backboard,
yeah.
their footwork is not great. I
Wow.
mean, just a lie, but they just have, they have a gift that a lot of, you know, you can't be 6'6" with a 45-inch vertical. That's just not, that's a gift.
Yeah.
And not everybody can be like that. I'm about 5'11", 6 foot.
Me too. Yeah. Me too.
Yeah, so I'm about 5'11", 6 foot.
Yeah.
People always say I'm about 5'4" when they watch my videos to know how low I get. But yeah, I'm about 5'11", 6 foot. And the one thing that I talk to my kids a lot about is all of us can learn to play lower to the ground.
Mm,
Okay, we can't learn to be 6'6" and jump, out of the gym. It's just not realistic. But every athlete on the court can learn to play lower and get stronger in a lower position.
right.
So if you're able to do that, that's one thing that I really, I really had to do because I couldn't out athlete the athletes.
Yes. Yeah.
I had to eliminate their athleticism by playing lower than them.
Right.
So just being able to move and match that footwork with the ball and get that sync, get that rhythm, get that timing, is something that I really focus on with a lot of these young kids. And just seeing the improvement once they understand it and fix it just skyrockets. It's unbelievable.
See, and just even on that, like you was just there speaking a lot about timing and footwork, which like again, working with my under 16s team, I'm reminded of, yes, we're working on this move, but the footwork behind it and making sure you're balanced and you're under control, I think is something that's so key that not a lot of players realize. But then I'm kind of starting to realize I don't think not a lot of coaches really highlight player movement like you do, Coach Hunter, timing and footwork. So, speaking about this timing and footwork, how do those two components directly influence how a player handles the ball?
Like, it just gives you great rhythm, the timing. I always call it ball and foot timing, or every step's a dribble, every dribble's a step.
Mm.
So when you're able to match, it just gives you a constant flow with what you're doing. It just gives you that rhythm to make the next play. So there's lots of different details. I wish, it's a lot easier to explain when I'm working with an athlete,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
just being there's ways you can move your feet, foot positioning, the way your knees need to be, the way your shoulders, knees, and toes need to be in line so you have a good center of gravity, so you're always in balance. A lot of younger kids like to lean forward when they dribble the
Mhm.
ball, then their feet get chopping really quick because their feet are trying to catch up to their body. And in a game, if you under there's somebody usually guarding us. So in basketball, you don't want to go, just straight. We want to go straight back, side to side, diagonal, diagonal. But that all results from your feet and your body positioning, being in a good position to make, create a play for yourself at all times. And that comes down to balance, center of gravity and all that. So just being able to find that rhythm is crucial.
And with regards to again, because you teach the details at such a great level, and it's really one, you make it fun, but two, is very quick and easy to understand. So can you kind of walk us through, how you teach ball handling from the ground up, and what are some of the
Yeah.
key progressions?
So I would say the first things first. I always make the kids, I always tell them, have you ever heard of the saying, the head, shoulders, knees, and
I think I know. Yeah.
that little song. They're like, yeah, we've heard that. We do it at school, blah blah blah. So that would be with my really really young kids. Then I'm like, okay, take away the head part. Let's do our shoulders, knees, and toes. Okay, then before you know it, these kids are starting to understand it. And it doesn't take. It's not one day. It
Yeah.
takes time. But I've had these young group of kids for 3 months, and they know now. It's just crazy seeing the difference of them doing it 3 months ago where they couldn't really even dribble because they had no, like, feel.
Yeah.
Now that looks like they're being able to dance with the ball a little bit, and that's all it is. It's poetry in motion. So,
Right.
I start with the fundamentals of having a wide, strong base, just like we're playing defense. Then I'm talking about our knees and our shoulders having a good line and just making us on balance.
Right.
And then basically from that point up, now how can we move our feet to keep it there? Because now it's every step's a dribble, every dribble's a step. Then once we just slowly build that up. So base starts with your feet, knees, our shoulders, knees, and toes are on in line. We make sure we pound the ball. Okay. And another reason for pounding the ball is because so many kids, they dribble with a flat hand
Yes. Yeah.
when they're younger, which is funny. I think we've all done it, right?
Right. Right.
And I like to pretend, we have a bowl in our hand or a suction cup, so that ball sticks to our hand. We have to have a bowl, like it suction cups right to our hand, because so many kids when they have a flat handed dribble, you're not able to make any decisions, and that goes for older players as well. The more time that ball is in your hand, the more time you have to make a decision.
Right.
And just understanding that feel of the ball, and it gives you just more feel in general. Because if you're always doing it like this, like you have no feel, and you can't make any plays because you just don't have a feel of it. So
Right.
putting those things together and feet, knees, shoulders, base, and then just slowly building it up to a little bit of movement. You'll see a lot of progressions in a few weeks. So it's pretty nice.
Right. And even in today's game, one thing I love is you're seeing the likes of, Kyrie, Damian Lillard, SGA, Luka Doncic. They're all great ball handlers, but they all create separation very differently and at different speeds and at different angles. So for yourself, coach, like you emphasize a lot just about separation moves as well. So how do you teach players to create separation without over dribbling?
And that's to me, that's more about changing your pace. So going slow to quick. And one thing growing up, and to be honest, this is something I learned as I've gotten older, is I was always quick and explosive. So I could always beat the person in front of me, which is great. But at the end of the day, as you get older and older and older, you start playing against better players, more athletic players. Beating that first person is great and all, but what are you going to do after that?
Sure. Yeah.
So you can't just use your speed at all times. The best players in the world, if you watch an SGA, a Jalen Brunson, they play at their own speed and own pace 24/7. And you can see them when they go quick, but 90% of the time they're playing slow because it's so much harder to guard going from slow to quick, 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 slow, slow, quick. That is much, much harder to guard. And I would say it really isn't about the move. It's, once again, how you move.
Yeah.
Are you going slow to quick? If you're just going fast all the time, that's very predictable and easy to guard. But when you turn the jets on and stop on a dime, there you go. You just created separation by just slowing down.
Yeah.
So I would say it's more so the speed of what you do things and just the pace that you play rather than what move you do or when it comes to separation.
Yeah. You see, I can tell just your coaching philosophy. I can just tell, coach, that you're big on it's not the drill or the move that makes the player, it's the understanding of that
Of
move.
how you do it. Yep.
Exactly, so I love that. I love that.
Oh, 100%.
Just even with regards to, you approaching, how players should finish through contact, whether it's, smaller guards, tall guards, how would you take that approach?
So that's another thing, right? 'Cause me being a smaller guard,
Yeah.
getting into the paint wasn't, and a lot of the time I'll kind of break this down from a coaching point of it too. Like smaller guards, just like myself, 6 feet under, whatever you may be. Getting to the paint is very crucial.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't understand that all of being able to get to the paint and make that right decision isn't, the ball or need to say it's from your feet. Like, so when you get there, how good is your balance?
Yeah.
You see, I'll come back to somebody that has great balance, and that's Jalen Brunson. He gets to the paint, he's always playing off 2 feet, so he can always make the next play. You rarely see him play off one because when if you jump off one leg and get bumped,
Yeah, that's it.
right, you have no balance.
Yeah.
It's over with. It's over with. That's why you see a lot of these higher level players play off 2 feet, a Shea, SGA, all these guards. Those are just two that stick out to my mind. But just being on balance and having a good base is what allows players to make that next play, whether it be for yourself or for a teammate. But obviously playing lower to the ground is great. A lot of the guys are like, how do you play so low? Like, you don't understand how many messages I get a day of, how do you play that low? And playing low, it's not just like, hey, I picked up a ball and I can do this. A lot of the time was spent in the weight room, being able to do certain things, getting your body strong. It's good to play lower, in my opinion, but it's good only when you're strong in those low positions.
Yeah.
Because if you're weak in those positions, it's pointless of what you're doing. So, just having a good base, it comes down to footwork and base, and that's why I love ball handling so much, because if you can understand the rhythm and timing of ball handling and the balance that you need to be able to always change directions and move, translates to almost everything else that you do in the game of basketball.
Right. And I'm kind of curious now, coach, because you brought up something in the beginning of the podcast, like not a lot of people realize in the videos, and then when you're in person with them and you throw them the ball, they're like, oh damn, coach, this is like heavy as hell. Like, what's the reasoning behind working out with a weighted ball?
And that's all I do. So like I'm in a gym, like when I get content, I'm in here for an hour just with a heavy ball. It feels like a regular ball to me now. It's almost my normal. So a regular ball feels weird.
Yeah, light,
Yeah, but and people are like, does it work? I'm like, 100% it works. It's just like weight training. Why do we lift heavier weights? So we get stronger at other things.
Sure.
I'm using a heavier ball. So but the thing is, it's not about like the hand speed. It's what it forces your body to do. Your body has to flow and move with that heavy ball to resist the weight. But it puts you in a position of how you should move with a regular ball, the flow and going side to side. And people are like, how do you dribble so fast? Well, it's not, has nothing to do with my hands. Yes, it gets better over time the more you do things. But I talk about other sports. I love like just, putting things together. If you play baseball, right, you don't swing with your arms in baseball. You swing with your hips. If you're watching boxing, they're not rock'em sock'em robots. They use their hips to do everything. Guess what? When I dribble, what do you notice? In my internal rotation of my hips and the way I move, that's what allows that ball to snap back and forth and just move at a constant motion, keep it a good flow, and be very, very violent with the dribbles that I'm doing. So just being able to just move, with that heavy ball has allowed me to use a regular ball, and it feels like a feather. Not gonna lie. So it feels like a feather.
What made you, coach, want to specialize in ball handling? What was it something you lacked when you was younger, or did you just study a player that just kind of opened up your mind to questions like, how is he able to get to that spot? Then you kind of break it down and then you start teaching it. Like what made you so passionate about ball handling? Because I can tell you really got this down packed, and just even how you teach it is with like bullet points and layers and areas of emphasis. So where did that curiosity start from?
Oh, I've always been a good ball handler. Um, excuse me. I'm still getting better, which is
Mm,
crazy. Um, but I wouldn't say there's a point in time where like, hey, I want to do this. I've always loved it, and I teach everything. Like, don't get me wrong. So many people are like, oh, do you only teach ball handling? No,
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't. And a
true.
lot of the workouts I do are less ball handling and more of the shooting and the pull up jumpers, the footwork, the finishing. Like, some just depending on who I'm working with, it's a lot different. Yes, and had to shoot. I shot the ball at a very high rate in college and stuff like that. But ball handling to me is it's my favorite.
Yeah.
That's something I love to post about. I love just the aspect of it,
Mm,
but there's no like certain thing that just said, hey, like I just want to teach this. Like it's not something that I wouldn't say I'm never gonna call myself an expert at anything, but if I had to pick my thing, I would say it's ball handling. I just love it.
yeah.
Just everything behind it. Just moving different. The just being different, moving different. Just enjoying it, but just getting that feel because I do think it translates to everything else.
Right.
So.
Right. And just with regards to like practical tips or even just advice for players, like what's one drill or like a understanding or concept that every guard should be doing consistently to improve their handle?
Um, as crazy as it sounds, but I mean, there's not really a secret to it.
Mm,
I wouldn't say there's a specific drill. It's obviously you got to go play. You got to go play. But you got to get your reps in too. But I would say just the secret, right? Which is not a secret, is how hard are you working and how often are you doing it? Like it's just consistency. One thing that people say about me, how often do you post? I post twice a day on social media. Every day, twice a day, usually at noon, then before I go to bed. Some nights if I'm traveling, I may do one, but I try to stick to two a day.
yeah.
Guess what? I'm in here repping a heavy ball handling daily, whether it be with clients or whether it be by myself. Like I'm doing things daily in order to get better. So many kids want instant gratification with everything.
Sure.
They want to see it right now. That's not the way it works. You're not going to see improvements, but when you do, you're really going to notice like, oh, I made a change. But I would just say this is how often are you doing it and how hard are you going? This is the key to it. And then, just use creativity, put some music on, go dance to a song, go put some rap music on, like go to the rhythm, the beat of it and just flow, just play,
Yeah.
just have fun with it while you do it.
That's true. And you just said something there that's powerful because it's even I would probably say for me as a kid, I kind of wanted that instant gratification. And even now it's like people who might see you like they they want to see the same view from the mountain that you've climbed, but they don't necessarily want to make that climb to see that whole view. And like you said, it's just doing the simple things like how hard you're working out, but how consistent are you working out as well. So with some of these athletes that you're working with, coach, are they aware of the fact that the work ethic needs to be there, or is that something that they kind of gradually learn over time?
Especially for young kids, I don't push like, hey, you gotta be in here 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to burn kids out at a young age. Like little kids, I think once a week for them, like just depending on age, right? So, young kids, if I see them once a week, that's plenty. And we do a lot of fun things, but then they go home and they do it.
Mm,
And that's the key. Then, the middle school, you start growing up a little bit more. And obviously, how good you want to be, the more time you got to put into it, right?
right.
And that goes obviously for professional athletes, then it's your life,
Right.
like that's what you do, but, I would just say, Man, I'm trying to think here. So, can you ask me that question again? I'm trying to get in so many different topics.
How do I think that the average athletes that you work with, when they want to get good at a skill, how should they approach that just with regards to, I mean, like you said, they don't want to burn themselves out every single day, but do you kind of highlight that, if you really want to get good at it, you're going to have to go through messing it up, then getting better, then you get close, but then you still mess up. Like, what's your overall approach just to teaching work ethic to some of these athletes?
Oh, no, perfect. Yeah, I love not I wouldn't say I love when kids fail, but the first question I ask them in here is like, I wouldn't say fail,
Yeah.
I would say more so mess up,
Right.
make mistakes,
Mm.
but sometimes they'll say, "Do I want you to fail?" And then they're always like, "No, no, 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 no," and it's funny. And at the end of the day, I do, and I'd say, "I don't want you to fail, but I want you to make lots and lots of mistakes
Yeah.
because with struggle comes growth."
True.
So the
Ooh,
more you
say that
struggle,
again,
the more
coach.
growth.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, with struggle comes growth.
Yes, sir.
So the more you struggle, right, the more you're going to grow as an individual, as a player. And that's with anything. That's not just basketball. That's everything you do, right? The reason, and I tell the kids, the ones that I'm training and working with, like the reason I can do what I do is because I have failed and messed up more than all of you combined, and I still do, I still mess up. I demonstrate drills and mess up because I always take pride in be able to show at full speed, pushing myself so they can see the tempo and just how hard, that I go. That's what I want them to do. But I would just say messing up is something that I encourage because so many kids are afraid to fail, whether it be social media, what their peers are going to say. But in here, like kids are messing up, balls are flying everywhere, but they still have a smile on their
Here we
face.
go. Yeah.
So, and which is crazy because, and at first you have a lot of kids that come in here and be like, I messed up. I don't know how to do this. And you're like, hey, I messed up more than you. And then, just getting that comfort, just being comfortable and being able to trust, what I do and stuff like that. But messing up is a part of it.
Yeah.
Like the best players in the world mess up more than everybody, but that's why they're so good at what they do.
Right.
And all the work is in here, like in the gym. I'm in the gym right now, and it starts here. You mess up here, so then when you get to game time, you can shine.
Here we go.
So, and so many kids are afraid to just to fail with how society is nowadays. But I take pride in having kids mess up
Yeah.
because I know they're getting out of their comfort zone. They're getting better, and the growth just comes a lot better and, yeah, I guess quicker the more mistakes they're making because then they just start figuring out as a player, as an athlete. So
Yeah, that's powerful. That's something that even for me, to be honest, coach, I've only just recently learned that lesson of messing up in front of players. Like before I would like practice the drill, look loads of times. So when it's time to demo, it's haha, finish. And then when I realized, and it was even shout out to Hayley Wright, playing over there at Long Beach, she was saying like for her, what made her grow as a player is when she saw her coach mess up and be honest about it. I was like, hey, listen, as a coach, I mess up as well. That gave her the fuel to be like, oh, like maybe let me experiment more. Okay, let me try and go hard. And like I don't need to be perfect. So I love that, coach. I love that.
no, and I do that all the time, especially with my older groups, even my college, high school groups that I have. I'll demonstrate something, then I'll mess up. Then I'll hear them say, "Oh, Coach Rhodes lost his hand." But it's just I'm like, guess what I'm gonna do though? I'm gonna do it again.
Right,
I'm gonna do it again.
right.
And then, but it's more of a joking type of thing. But then when they mess up, it's next play, it's next one, it's next rep. Then it's a culture of just everybody's just trying to get better at the end of the day. Everybody's pushing each other. We're getting better, but we're having fun. We're enjoying it along the way.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
Yeah. And you just said something there, like when I kind of asked you what makes a great ball handler, you were speaking about, timing, footwork, having a good base, and just overall flow, and for yourself, coach, like how can players learn to read defenders better while dribbling rather than just focusing on predetermined moves?
Yeah, and in everything, nothing should be predetermined,
Yeah.
right? So that's why when people are like, "Oh, these moves aren't going to work in a game," and the stuff I teach, a lot of the stuff I'm telling the kids, like, "You'll never use this in a game," and I'll tell them straight up, they're like, "Hey, you're not going to use this move in a game,
Right.
but what you are going to use is that footwork, is that timing, is that rhythm, is that base, is that balance, and you need that 24/7 with everything you do." So that's one thing I really focus on is because like I said earlier, is I don't care about what move you do. I care about how you move. And being able to react to defenders isn't necessarily the move. Like you're never just going to do a crossover every time down the court, right? It might be a behind the back, might be a between the legs. It might just be I just drop stance and go.
Yeah.
You know, this little things like that. But just having their footwork and all that already in place is the idea behind everything that I teach when it comes to ball handling.
Yeah.
Just so they can make that reaction, whether it be they have to cross right. Now the defender cuts them off. Now I can stop on a dime. But all of that stopping on a dime and moving and changing comes down to your feet and your balance.
Right.
That's one thing I really focus on.
Exactly. And even just from the athletes that you've worked out, coach, and even when you kind of watch the game as well, in your opinion, coach, what separates high level guards from average ones when it comes to how they use their dribble in games?
Just about how efficient are they? You know, how efficient are they? Because it just depends on what type of guards you're watching too. Like I was a really pure point guard growing up.
Okay.
So a lot of things were very, I was very unselfish. I wanted to get my teammates involved, especially at college. It got, I didn't have to score as much. So it was more so getting everybody involved,
Right.
and just picking your spots and knowing how to, what do you need? What do you need to do for your team for them to be successful? And a lot of the times where we watch these SGAs and Jalen Brunsons and stuff like that, but a lot of these kids will never, I'm not saying you can't be them, but you're probably not going to be an SGA or a Jalen Brunson and be able to dribble and make moves all the time.
Yeah.
So being able to, rip drive, catch the ball, rip drive, go downhill, stop on a dime, get in the paint, create a play for somebody else is a lot more than important rather than just, pounding the ball and doing a ton of different moves just because it's not realistic. If everybody could do that, I mean, there's usually one or two guys on each team that can make plays in an ISO situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just, then what are the other 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 role guys doing?
Right.
Because that's not their role, and I'm not saying these guys aren't capable of doing it,
Yeah.
and you won't be capable of it. And when the time comes, and if you have it, great. But, but that's why I focus so much more on, like you said, I'm gonna say it again, how you move
Yes.
rather than the move, because your footwork is something that you'll need for everything you do.
True.
And I think it'll translate to anything, shooting, the ball handling, the defense,
Right.
the balance, and it all comes back to that. So if you don't have a good base, you're not going to be good, really at anything.
Right.
So
Right. And you even just mentioned it there, like just when it comes to movements and decision making. I mean, you teach movement with the ball. Can you kind of share body positioning and angles that play a role in effective ball handling?
oh, for sure. And a lot of that's just reading the defense,
Yeah.
attacking angles. So just think you have a straight line to the basket. If you're cut off, now you can change lines. Like it's about a game. It's a game of lines. So if I'm going right, they cut me off. Boom. Now I'm a sharp angle in the next direction. How quick can you change lines? So a lot of players, especially younger players, they don't necessarily like contact. So that's one thing I work on a lot with the younger kids is, if you have a space, a lot of kids like to round it out.
Yeah.
Okay. They're afraid of that initial contact, which is, I understand it when you're younger and stuff like that.
Right.
But as you get older, as you know, like the game, you have to be very efficient and get to your spots, a quick manner. So, just being able to, explode certain directions and take certain angles, whatever the defense may give you,
Yeah.
right? If you see a shoulder of the defense, if you see their outside shoulder and if I'm going right and I can see their left shoulder in front of me, I need to attack that because I know they didn't cut me off.
Right.
If I see their chest in front of me, I know they cut me off because they slid in front of me. Now I can change directions and go and attack the next hip. So there's so many different things that I wish we could do like a little, seminar of an athlete out here. But, just being able to really just understand angles and, it all comes down to this, your balance. Like, I get tired of saying it, but it's your footwork, the way you can explode, are your feet close together? Because if your feet are close together, and this is what I see a lot with players, even at the highest level, right? They're so good at drill work, but when they get to a game, you don't see it translate. So then you're like, wait a minute. So like, why can they do it in drill work, but they can't do it in a game, and I've seen it. And the more I have started to do this, the more I'm figuring it out. It's because their base and their feet are so close together that anytime they receive contact, they're off balance and can't execute going to the rim or going around a defender. Because obviously the game is a contact sport. So being able to have a wider, stronger base is just going to allow you to absorb contact and hold that balance a lot better, and just being able to move side to side a lot better. So that's one thing I've noticed. If a kid's super good in drills, maybe they're doing stationary ball handling, movement ball handling with no defender. A lot of the times it's their feet that mess up everything because they're not in a strong position to explode through that contact or make a good athletic play.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's something that I need to
So
kind of keep my eye on as well, just with regards to footwork. And even with that, coach, like, how do you help players? Because even for myself, when I'm teaching ball handling or shooting, it might start off very robotic, but then afterwards, the whole point is to kind of flow with the ball and kind of just, work on energy transference and things of that nature. So how do you help players become more fluid and less robotic in the movements when attacking defenders?
oh, no, that's a great question, and a lot of that can get really technical,
Mm,
and it's a little bit easier to explain, I guess, when I have an athlete in here.
right.
But I was just working with an athlete a little bit ago, and so many kids don't understand, like, when they take steps, like, if your foot is out in front of your body, like, the first thing you're gonna be is stuck in mud. I always talk about stuck in mud or you're in quicksand, so your next steps are slow. Right? The game of basketball comes down to a 1-2 step. And if you haven't really thought about it, every time we drive to the rim, our back leg and then it's our front leg to attack. If we shoot, it's 1-2, right? If everything we do if I do a crossover, I don't just step with my left to cross right. I use my back leg to propel. I call it the jet or the engine. I tell our kids, like, it's our jet or it's our engine for us to take off. So you use that weight, that weight transfer of loading on your back leg to really push, the opposite direction, but then you're loading on the next leg. Like, it's really hard to explain, I guess, over this talking here, but, it's all about just your body positioning and how you move your feet, but everything is 1-2,
Yeah.
1-2, 1-2. Okay. 1-2. I stop 1-2. I shoot 1-2, right? Everything is obviously there's different ways to shoot, stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, a lot of the stuff I do, you watch my feet. If you watch a sprinter, I talk about, the step they take, their first initial step. Even though they're in a block, that heel is hitting that
Yeah,
back block
exactly.
to propel them
Yeah.
to go forward. That false step and it's quicker and it just allows you to explode. So, and I apply that same movement to basketball.
Yeah.
So, and when they figure it out and understand it, they're like, oh my gosh, that was so quicker. I was like, I know.
Right.
I know, they're more explosive, that's being shifty,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I talk about kids all the time, like, if you're playing defense on somebody, you're not watching the ball,
Mm.
sometimes you look at the ball and blah, 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 but you gotta see where their hips are going, and I was taught look at the belly button when I was growing,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you can't go anywhere without the belly,
Right.
so why are we so concerned about where the ball goes?
Right.
If the defender is reacting to our body, we need to learn to move our body to force a reaction from the defender,
True.
so
True. And this is something that I've realized, like, what, again, in my opinion, what great ball handlers are able to do as well is, yes, they're able to speed up, but if you don't have brakes to be able to stop on a dime, once you create that separation, and you got to put on the brakes to change speed and direction, or you might need to put on the brakes to then reset the play or kick it out because you're being double teamed. Like, for yourself, how important is just not just being able to accelerate but decelerate as well?
Oh, and that almost might be more important, to be honest. Being able to accelerate is great, but it's not about how fast you are, it's about how fast you can stop. If you
Ooh,
watch like the
I
Luka
like
Don
that set.
if you look about like the Luka Doncic, right? Obviously, he's a lot more athletic than what people think because he's going against freak athletes all the time.
Right, sure.
But he's not near as athletic and as fast as the guys he's going against.
Uh,
But what he does a great job of is start and stop and start and stop and start and stop. And it's just the change of pace and the timing and the rhythm of that is almost impossible to guard,
mm,
And I tell everybody can play slow. I was like, can everybody walk that's in here dribbling the ball? And they're like, yep, 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 I can. All right. And guess what? You're fast maybe here, then the fastest guy may be up here, but you can still go slow to fast in your own body. So being able to figure that out, going from slow to boom, now I'm at my top speed, then you can see a difference and you're way harder to guard.
mm.
So just changing speeds, if you watch Luca, that'd be a great one to do it. SGA is another one that's just unbelievable at changing speeds, and then when they wanna turn on the jet, they can a little bit.
Right. And this is something that I've learned as well. I mean, especially watching the playoffs, what makes a great guard, because I think the common saying would be, you have to be a three-level scorer, but now I feel like there's so many levels. I mean, SGA is a prime example of he can ISO ball, he can post up as a guard, he can, catch and shoot off the three, floater, counters. Like he's such a great guard because he has so many counters and just he's a defensive headache because it's not like you have to be worried about, okay, I know he's gonna catch and shoot, or he's gonna go to this, then maybe have a counter move. But if he's got someone who's weaker than him, he's gonna post you up. If he's got someone who's slower than him, he's gonna take you out, hit you with a three, or drive by you. So like for yourself, coach, like what also goes into um being a great guard, would you say?
I think just being a great guard in general is, and I may approach this a little different way. For me, it was, um, do your teammates trust you? I'm gonna more of a broad approach here. Like
Mhm.
how the best players to me in the world are the ones that make their teammates around them a lot better.
Yeah.
So to me, like how good are you making XYZ, right? Are your teammates getting open looks because you created a play for them? Are you the external coach that's on the floor because that's what you need to do as a guard? And I know there's different situations where shooting guards, but point guards in general, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is being able to control the game. And that isn't scoring. That isn't just, making the right pass, but that can be anywhere from knowing when to push the ball to when to slow it down, knowing that we need a defensive stop, knowing that you communicated to your teammate to rotate to the next spot because that guy got beat. There's so many details that can go into being a really good, I guess, point guard. Just be an extension of the coach on the floor. I mean, you hear that one a lot, but just, making sure your guys trust you and believe in you. Like when we have the ball, the game's going to slow down for everybody. Like if the ball's in my hands, I want my guys on the court to feel comfortable, right? They know the right play is coming. They know we're going to be in the right spots. I think that as a point guard, I think that's just crucial.
Yeah.
Just having everybody around you, the game just slows down and everybody's comfortable.
Right. Right. And just a final topic, just with regards to your coaching insights before we wrap up with the Beyond the Game segment. What are some of the most underrated skills you think guards should be developing in today's game?
I would say definitely finishing off 2 feet and playing off 2 feet. I know a lot of the higher level guys do that, but you see a lot of the times, especially high school and whatnot, a lot of kids don't necessarily play off 2 feet and they're not really as patient.
Yeah.
So I think playing off 2 feet is a huge skill. Then obviously being able to do all three things, offensive skill set wise, passing, shooting, dribbling, right? The game is changing. You can see it before our eyes. You got 7-3 guys, 7-4 guys now handle the ball, shooting threes, taking people to the rim. Like it's just the game is changing. So, you have to work, you got to be able to do all three things. You got pass, dribble, shoot, play defense. If you're a smaller guy like us, like we didn't really talk about defense, but that's another thing that's just, I mean, don't limit yourself on what you can do. You want to try to be good at everything, but I wouldn't say there's a correct answer for that, but I would say playing off 2 feet, being able to learn the game of basketball, make sure you watch it, just keep learning, just keep growing and just keep getting better.
Right. And just with regards to for some of the coaches listening, what advice do you have on involving ball handling work into team practices effectively?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of fun things you can do, not just drill wise, but I just was working with a college team and you get to see these guys are phenomenal
Yeah.
athletes. But you can see you put a ball in their hand and they just don't understand and have that rhythm or that flow of how to properly handle a basketball, right? And it's crazy because I think so many kids, whether it be high school or middle school, high school, college, you can all benefit from it because ball handling to me isn't just I've become a very, very good defender. I've always been a good defender, but I've gotten better at defense, so much better at defense, and I've never worked on defense.
Wow.
I've worked on ball handling and footwork because I have to understand my balance, my footwork, the partial steps that I need to handle the ball. like able to cut people off. It's the same motions that you need while you're guarding somebody.
Mm.
So adding that to a daily regimen isn't just going to make you better with the ball in your hands, but it's going to fix so many different categories.
And it's just even there, coach, because I find it rare when even when a player comes up to me and I says, "Your coach, I love playing defense." I'm like, "You mean shooting, right?" "No, no, no, defense." "Nah, you mean like making a game winning shot?" "No, no, coach, defense, like getting a stop and the player's mad that they couldn't get to their spot and shoot." I love that, which I think is kind of rare. Like for yourself, coach, like what is your relationship with defense and like I don't know, just for yourself, like what goes into the mind of effective de- defender?
Just being a pest,
Yeah,
I guess,
yeah, yeah,
getting up in them, making them uncomfortable. For me, like I didn't have the luxury of playing 3 feet off and having my 6'5", 6'7"
yeah.
wingspan, to contest everything.
Right.
But what I could do is get lower than everybody,
Mm,
which makes everybody super uncomfortable.
yeah.
And you can't move. You can't move if I'm lower than you. How are you going to beat me?
Mm,
So I take pride in that, and I wouldn't say necessarily. There's lots of different techniques that you can use about guarding the pivot foot. Not letting them beat your top foot, which we don't probably have time for that.
mm,
But I would say just the mindset behind it is probably the most important. You gotta want to do it.
yeah.
You can't tell me a good defender that you watch in the NBA or whatever level you're watching. They're not gonna get on a mic and tell you like, yeah, I do not like defense at all. They're gonna say, I love getting a stop. I love playing
Right.
defense because that's the mindset they
Yeah.
have. And the best defenders are all usually gonna tell you like, that's my mindset. I love it. Like I get after it. Like, effort, toughness, energy.
Mm,
I think those things are more so, more important
yeah.
rather than the technique behind it. Yes, I know there's techniques and stuff, but just having that mindset and that mentality, it will be huge.
Right. And just the final part, coach, before we wrap up is the beyond the game segment. And his first question, I'm super intrigued. Now with this one, coach, this could go the basketball route or the life route. The first question is what would you say, Coach Hunter, is a skill that is taught by many but only mastered by a few?
Ooh, a skill that's taught by many, but mastered by a few. Oh, that's a tough one. Man, I would talk more about just life in general
Yeah.
here. And it's now I feel like you see it more, but I'm going to keep it
Yeah.
simple and nothing too crazy. But I would just say the overall work ethic and the consistency with which you do things. The best, if you see the best to ever do something, it's how consistent are they at what they do?
Yeah.
Okay. They're not doing anything different. Like champions, like the saying is champions are built on the other side of I don't want to.
Mm,
So, so what does that mean? That means if there's days where I don't want to come in here, there's really, I got 3 kids at home. I'm
mm,
trained to there's days where I don't want to come in, but I'm like, I gotta come in because that's just the consistency and the accountability and discipline, that you need in order to really take it to that next level of where you want to be, whether it be your job, sports, that can relate to anything.
I like that. I like that. Next one, coach, the best piece of advice you ever received.
Best piece of advice I ever received. Ah, man. I've gotten a lot of good advice.
Nice.
Um, from a lot of different coaches, trainers, talking to him, there's a lots of different things that I would say, but I would just say just growing up,
Mm,
just growing up, just like my dad who used to have me in the gym a lot and doing that type of stuff. But it would just be more so, just the hard work and consistency,
yeah.
but that's why I am like I am today. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that is a skill. Like if everybody you can't say it's not because some kids don't do it.
Right.
Just like TJ McConnell said the other day, playing hard is a skill.
Sure.
Why don't everybody play hard then if it's not a skill? Like, why wouldn't you play
Yeah.
hard? You have to learn those habits at a young
Yeah.
age. I wouldn't say there's no one specific piece of advice that I've learned that's better.
Yeah.
I'm just, I would just say just at a young age, like, I think parents as well, just make sure your kids are, disciplined, held accountable. And that's one thing I tell my kids when I'm training. If they don't take any skill work from me, the one thing I want them to take is holding yourself accountable and working hard. because that's going to carry with them a lot further than a basketball will in life. So that's one thing that I love. And if they learn that from me, that's going to mean a lot more in the long run.
So true. So true. And just the final two, this next one, you have to fill in the blank. So the sentence is, if it wasn't for basketball, I wouldn't have learnt filling the blank about myself.
Say that one more time
I
for me.
got you. If it wasn't for basketball, I wouldn't have learnt filling the blank about myself.
Man, that's good. If it wasn't for basketball, I wouldn't learn to be as driven as what, you know, that maybe I knew I was capable of,
Yeah,
but I knew what I want, what I'm passionate about and what I wanted to pursue. Like basketball, like to me, I wouldn't say it's my life. I have a family,
yeah,
I
of
have
course,
kids,
yeah,
but if you look at me, you're going to think it's people look at me like Coach Rhodes, basketball.
yeah,
He's moving different,
yeah, yeah.
but moving different to me, it's more so for myself is how disciplined, accountable, how driven am I to keep pushing it to the new limits and just keep growing what I'm doing.
Yeah, love
So I
that.
would say driven and accountable,
Yeah,
discipline, whatever, one of those
yeah,
words.
for sure, for sure. And just a final one, I'm gonna paint the picture before we wrap up. There's a player who's been following you forever, coach, and he's finally found out that you've released a book. So he's just literally finished his training and he's on his way to his nearest bookstore and he's asking the librarian, do you know where I can get the brand new book from Coach Rhodes? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. You just go up the stairs, you go to the sports section, you go to the best-selling sport the sports section, top floor, can't miss it. So he's there with his backpack, he's going up the stairs, turns left and he sees it. And he grabs the book, coach, and he's looking at it. And the question, coach, that I've got for you is, what would the title of your autobiography be?
Man, it would have to be moved different. It would have to be moved different
Yeah.
because I think that just approaches in so many different aspects, right? Because 95% of the game is mental and how you do things outside of the game of basketball that's going to allow your basketball game to really develop. So I think just move different, man. You got to approach it a different way, not just the working hard in the gym, but just your balance, you just and with everything that you do,
Right.
time management, just move different,
Yeah.
do things different if you want to achieve the dreams that you have.
Right. That's big time, man. Honestly, coach, I really appreciate your time. I mean, there was a lot of things that I learned, and I'm sure for players who want to take their ball handle to the next level, they've got a lot of gems to look back on. For coaches who want to just implement, just or understand the importance of ball handling, and not just the what, but the how as well. Lots of gems. But when it comes to the socials or people who want to reach out, where can they find you, coach?
On Instagram, you can find me at Rhodes Basketball Academy. Facebook, it's Hunter Rhodes. Pretty much those two are the ones that I really uh, connect with everybody with. And I'm a pretty, I'll get back to you.
Right.
I try to help as many people as possible. I'm not a mean guy, so reach out and I'll do my best to help anybody that has any questions. And, I just love to help as many people as possible. So I'm open to any questions that anybody may have.
Absolutely. I definitely appreciate your time, coach. And listeners, do not worry for those who are watching and are listening. I will put all of the links in the description of this episode. But this has been a gem for me, coach. So once again, coach, thank you so much for your time. And this is myself, Coach D, and Coach Rhodes signing out.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.